We've seen the game situation in Brazil from the perspective of the consumer, the fans, and the media. But what about the ones who actually make games here? I'd always found it odd to hear so often about Brazil's rabid fanaticism for video games, but never about games that came from Brazil. Aside from a few outliers, I couldn't point to one big, defining game company. The country's big enough, so why is this the case? Was it some weird knock-on effect of the country's restrictions on electronics? Or something else? To find out, I started with Lanny Neely, an indie developer I met in São Paulo. As an American living in Brazil, I figured Lanny would be a good way to bridge the cultures.
There are creative people doing art, they're doing programming, they're doing music, they're setting up their own teams in a way, but you don't really hear about them a lot in what they're dealing with. There's the team in Brasilia who did Chroma Squad, and a couple others here and there. I think Papo and Yo became really popular for being Brazilian. But then you look at other indie games and you see the credits, even if it's like a 3, 4, or 5 person team. It's like, oh, the art was made by Brazilian. Or, oh, one of the programmers was Brazilian, like contracted. One of the musicians. We have Towerfall is a great example. It's a huge hit. And its artistic redesign was made possible by Studio Miniboss, which are a great couple people who live here in São Paulo. But when you think of Towerfall, you don't think, oh, this is a Brazilian game, or Brazilians worked on it. They're kind of like in the shadows. It's like the indie scene is secretly layered with like Brazilians who are multi-talented and giving out their expertise everywhere you look.
Brazil's distributed, scattershot nature of game development is changing. As you might expect from a society of like-minded game fans, game developers have started to band together. Dumativa, Rafael Bastos' company based in Rio de Janeiro, is a perfect example. Within this so-called indie house are 2 recording studios, a video set, and multiple workspaces for Dumativa and other folks they've partnered with, like game developers, and even YouTube channels.
And here we're trying to make something that Rio de Janeiro don't have. We're trying to make a place for YouTubers and producers to integrate and try to make the content and deliver the content to the audience. It's an experimental thing. We're still trying to make this work. Some of government, they're trying to make this work too, or some public investments. And with public investments comes the private investment. So our companies are working together to make other companies grow. So we give lectures, workshops. We are not afraid of having competitors here in Brazil, because we need that for the environment.
Dumativa is part of a larger informal partnership called Ring, which includes more than a dozen developers around the Rio area, many of whom were there that day. Bruno showed us Sword Legacy.
It's a tactical RPG. It's our vision of the Arthurian legends.
Camilla demoed Hollow Drive.
We like to say it's like Quake meets Mario Kart in 2D.
Fernando brought The Light of the Darkness.
It's an indie game which I'm developing for many years, more than 7 years.
Kim showed off Racket Boy.
We received the racket in the craft from our capybara.
And Jonathan showed us a fighting game called Suits of Fate, the only game we saw that day that featured elements of Brazilian culture. Mateus is a member of the popular YouTube channel Castro Brothers and is making a game based on a video they made.
It was meant to be a joke, but the joke caught on. People thought it was an actual game, even though it wasn't. We just faked one. We did a crowdfunding campaign in 2014, and we released it in Portuguese only in 2016, last year. It's like Bastion, it's like the Stanley Parable, but within the song. He's singing a lot, and it changes depending on what you do or what you don't do, and it's all within this key of the sync to the tune.
That's the international joke, everybody gets that.
And right now we're in the stage of trying to localize more than 3,000 stanzas into English and make it rhyme and make it work.
Wow.
And sing all this, yeah. The crowdfunding campaign was only limited to Brazil, in Portuguese only. We didn't go like other Brazilian devs do, like go to Kickstarter or Indiegogo and ask for a global audience for their money, because we thought, nah, why would we do that? Because we had this local audience that was really craving for the idea of the game, so it actually worked out for the best, because if we did a global campaign, even if we tried to explain the mechanic, it might have done okay, but maybe not as well as it did with the local audience, because we were able to do a more focused campaign, and that's something that's important about crowdfunding. You have to have laser focus on who you're talking to make it work. If you're trying to speak to one audience and another at the same time in English and Portuguese, it gets kind of muddy and you get kind of lost in it. So we made this gamble. We will bet on a Brazilian audience, the audience that watches our videos and like them, and it paid off.
But there are risks involved with targeting Brazil only. As Bruno told us, there's a reason his team decided to base their game on The Legend of King Arthur.
We think it's easier to promote the game with a classical, universal history. Of course, we have a lot of ideas to make games from the Brazilian culture, but I think it's very risky. You have some games from Brazil that they achieved good sales, but if you go to Steam Spy, for example, and let me see how many sales is from Brazil. Probably you see 10%, 20% from Brazil only. Because the Brazilian player still prefers to play the Assassin's Creed and the GTA and this AAA game. So I think it's very dangerous to Brazilian developers release your games onto the Brazilian market. We have people only say, oh, it's Brazilian movie, I don't like it. It's Brazilian game, probably it's not a good game. It's wrong, but I think this happens also because the media, the Brazilian media, don't show the Brazilian games how they show the international, the blockbuster games.
That sentiment seems to be changing, especially with more and more events like the Brazil Game Show.
They are pretending they are working.
all beer in the world has vanished, and now they have to find out why.
With some major game events that are occurring here in Brazil, we were able to make people see the game, and these kind of events are getting bigger and bigger with time, and I think people, the public here in Brazil are starting to really see Brazilian-made games as product of quality, because we're really trying to make quality product. If we don't put enough effort, and if we don't go one step further than whatever has already been made in Brazil, we're not going to succeed in this hill we're trying to climb.
A more indie-friendly culture seems to be on the horizon in Brazil. I asked Camilla what happens when Brazilians play Hollow Drive.
A lot of people get really surprised. We were actually in Rock in Rio, which is a super huge music entertainment event where lots of bands and singers come from all over the world for 2 weekends, and there are millions of people walking by, and they played our games, and they were super excited. They were like, I didn't know games like these were made in Brazil. They had no idea, because we have this culture that video games are something that just come from outside. They didn't even know someone could make games. They don't even think about that. It's a struggle to actually, like, if someone young wants to study games, they have to explain, and it's really hard to explain to their parents or their family what they're going to do. And so we're starting to make like an example in cases.
These attitudes make it difficult to secure funding in Brazil from any source other than crowdfunding. Camilla translated for Kim, who explained what having a business in Brazil is like.
Brazil is not an easy place to be an entrepreneur, to start your own business. And on top of that, we are constantly trying to explain to people what is a game, why is making games relevant, why is this something that people should be doing, why there should be investments on this area and everything. So it's a constant struggle putting two different things, two very different and hard things already together.
Camilla's own company, BitCake, had to go halfway around the world to learn how to secure a publisher.
The industry here is like developing now, so we're just starting, and it's a bit hard for us to get attention from outside. But now we're growing, and we had the opportunity to go to Estonia and be accelerated by Game Founders, which is a game only accelerated in Europe. So we had this experience and was very good to develop the company, understand a bit more about business, get to know a lot of people, and then I think that helped us like want to get a publisher and then get a publisher.
Hearts and minds are changing in Brazil. Games are becoming more accepted, making it easier to convince local investors.
You have here in Brazil its explosion of the esports. Now you have big awards for the winners with a lot of money. So I think some older people is changing his mind about the game. So it's not a thing for child playing. It's a serious market. It's bigger than the movies market now. So I think it's changing, but it's in the Brazil everything is slow.
Nowadays we have the advantage that people are playing games on their day-to-day life. Like people are on the subway, they have a cell phone, they're playing games, a smartphone. And so when he gets asked about that, he can just answer, but how do you think your life would be if you had nothing to play? Do you really not think this is something important for people's lives, having some entertainment, having games to play? So there is this advantage nowadays, and also games is something that he's really passionate about. So we are, as Brazilians, are passionate about. So there's also this element we can explain that, saying this is something that we really love doing, that we really want to do, and there is value to doing this, bringing like joy to other people's lives by making games.
But why now? What changed? What is helping Brazilian developers now surmount traditional roadblocks like stigmas and piracy?
Steam is actually helping quite a lot with piracy in Brazil. Digital games in general. It began with Steam, but it's actually helping quite a lot. Piracy is still rampant in Brazil, more than most anywhere else in the world, but we are doing okay. I see people actually realizing that, dude, maybe we should buy those games if we want people to be able to make them. The indie scene helped this a lot, because people were thinking, they got millions of dollars, what, just one customer? I mean, it's not like it will make a difference. And with indie developers that they can know and get to talk to on the internet, they say, oh wait, my money might actually help. Yeah, I mean, I want more of this, so this has a palpable effect, a tangible difference, so maybe I should help with my wallet. And they do, and it's showing improvements. I'm very optimistic about the gaming scene in Brazil.
I think what changed is that the community of developers started working more together and acknowledging that we can only go so far if we go alone, and we have to like get out there and show the country as a whole what we're doing. Before, like, there were a few companies making games, but they didn't talk so much, they weren't connected. Sometimes they had some kind of like a competitive feel, like you're making also a game and you're a competitor of mine. But nowadays we don't have that vision, so we think that we're all in this together, and if you are successful, I will be more successful because you are. We need cases, you know, we need someone to be super successful so everyone will look at us and see, oh, this is a profitable business, this is something that is good for our society as a whole. So we need everyone to succeed.
The importance of collaboration is an attitude that spans Brazil, reaching as far as the retro-futuristic capital city of Brasilia, deep in the heart of the country. Saulo Camarati is the founder of Behold Studios, creators of Chroma Squad and Knights of Pen and Paper. Just recently, Behold opened a co-working space in Brasilia called the Indie Warehouse.
We want to share the costs of having a studio. We want to help marketing, QA, testing, and everything to like to release the weight of the shoulders of the developers, so they can like focus on their games and do better stuff. You know, usually Brazilians tend to think as a collective. You know, they're always trying to share this experience. They always want to talk about what they're learning, what they're like creating. For more than 20 years, video games were just like a foreign thing for us. We didn't develop games here in Brazil. Everything was very expensive. But like for the past 10 years, with internet, with the platforms and consoles all opening up for the indie developers, the technology is more accessible right now. We have a lot of engines that are free. We have like everything that we need to work, the tools that we need is very accessible. So now we have a lot of developers that are starting to create their own games.
To break in the warehouse, Behold was hosting their inaugural game jam. The theme for the jam was arcade games. In Brazil, arcades are known as fliperamas, thus Flipper Jam.
Do you get to sleep?
No. We decided to make a game about creating an arcade. The players would have to chop the wood, to assemble the pieces together to create an arcade.
You're using Unity?
Yes, I'm a great fan of Unity. It's great to the community. It helps a lot. Mainly us here in Brazil, we don't have too much attention to the game developers at all. But recently, Unity and Unreal also, but mostly Unity, have been to every event that we have around here. Even in Brasilia, that is a small town, Unity is always present. It is always going to the events, giving stuff to developers. I think it's pretty cool. Help us a lot.
Yeah, it's great to see people finally noticing Brazil and saying like, oh, people want to make games here.
We exist.
Yeah.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Not only do game developers exist in Brazil, there is a palpable feeling here of change, of optimism, hope for the future. And if I learned anything from the people I met in Brazil, it's that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles, they have the passion, creativity, and drive to make whatever they want a reality. If you liked this video, you can thank these folks who support ClothMap on Patreon. Their contributions help pay for flights, accommodation, transport, guides, translators, camera operators, editors, music licensing, and more. If you think stories like this deserve to be told and would like to see more videos like this, consider joining us over at Patreon. You'll also get early access to videos, behind-the-scenes notes and documents, extended cuts, live stream chat, and the ability to vote on where ClothMap goes next.